Okay. Hi, everyone. Great to see you here today. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we in the lab are joining you from the lands of the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation. And I'd encourage you online to share what lands you're joining us from today as well. We're very lucky to have a presentation today by Dr. Fatemeh Aminpour, who's a research associate at the City Futures Research Centre here at UNSW. And she's going to be sharing with us some pretty exciting research, I think anyway, on vertical schools. And as part of the research, she did 24 walking tours with children aged between 8 and 13 across 3 Australian vertical schools about their experiences. So she's going to share with us that work today. Welcome, Fatemeh.
Hey, hello everyone. So this is the project that this is actually last year, and it's been funded by Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitats, and it's focusing on child-friendly environments in vertical schools.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Good, great. So we know that vertical schools have been designed and developed to respond to land scarcity in inner city areas and high populations is growing actually. We know that by 2050, about 90% of Australians will live in cities, and predictions show the increase of more than 500,000 students in Australia, and it means that we will need at least 6 classrooms for each day for the next 10 years to respond to this population growth. And we can see that this reflects. Actually, this population growth is most likely happening in Queensland, Victoria, and New South Wales, and the number of vertical schools showing this growth across the 3 jurisdictions. So we have more than 10 actually vertical schools in Victoria being built only during the last 5 years. And what is a vertical school? Vertical schools, they have different definitions, but you know, as it shows, it's grown vertically, not horizontally, and it's very likely that have 4 stories or more. So we don't have much research on this school typology, and from the case studies around the world, and we know that they being designed in a way that organize the layout around the central atrium to increase visibility and the vertical connection between the floors. And they use this hell actually stairs very frequently in this school typology. Hellerup, it comes from the school name, International School of Hellerup in Copenhagen, because it's famous for that school, and it comes with deep threads and high rises, which is good for like for an auditorium, and it's kind of a theater-like speeches. So we have this in different schools, and it's one of the characteristics of these schools. But are these characteristics like good? You know, does it work for students and educators? You know, these Hellerup stairs or atriums and this kind of layout. We know from very limited research, because it's a very controversial topic. This school has been built at indoor spaces, so students' access to outdoor spaces very limited, and it's very controversial, especially for primary school students, because they need to have access to outdoor spaces. Sometimes outdoor learning happening in these schools, and natural environment is quite important for these students. And there are also other issues. We have issues of flexibility and noise because of this atrium. And vertical circulation is not that easy, especially for this amount of population. And it's not really easy to extend these schools. It's in contrast to horizontal schools that they build in multiple buildings on the school ground. It's not something that is possible here. Maintenance is another issue. Vertical and the windows and exterior is not easy to maintain frequently. But why do we need these schools to be child friendly? We know that children spend more than 30 or an average 30 hours of their week at school, and this is more than any other daytime activities that they do at home or the neighborhood. And actually, class time is the second after sleep time, so they spend a lot of time at the school, so they should be child friendly. Research questions that I had in my study, I was after the characteristics of these schools that students liked or disliked, and also the physical environment that support these characteristics, or if they had any problems, if they face any problems in these schools that can be regulated by physical environment design. So this was a participatory qualitative study. I completed in 3 schools in Brisbane and Melbourne. They had 6, 7, and 10 stories. And I couldn't do this study in New South Wales because all this research was suspended during that time because of COVID in New South Wales at school. I completed 24 walking tour interviews with 38 students, and they age between 8 to 13 years old. It means that I actually recruited the students from years 3 to 7. And across these schools that I recruited, 2 were public school. One was K to 6, the other one 7 to 12. So 1 primary school, 1 high school, and the private school catered the student from K to 12. In terms of the layout of these schools, they've been designed in a way, they did different. They were different in terms of the layout and class configuration and the location of the corridors. So from this. The first school on the left-hand side, school 1, you can see that it's a open plan school. And can I show it here? Oh, yeah. Okay. No, it's not true. Anyway, so it's an open plan school. There are 2 clusters, those purple area, those classrooms, 2 clusters of classrooms. Each cluster has 3 classrooms, and each of these 3 classrooms, they have access to a terrace. And then we have this orangish common area in the middle of these classrooms that's open to the staircase. So it's very open. It's open, the classroom is open plan. It's open to the common area, and common area is open to the stairway. In contrast, we have school 2 that has these classrooms organized around an atrium, a central atrium, and they are not open plan. They are closed, and instead of having 1 central stairway, we have 3 stairways actually around the building. The main one is this one that it's connected to the terrace, but the other 2 they are fire escape stairways, and it's good to have 3 of them around the school. The other one, school 3, it's more traditional. We have classroom around a corridor, and then we have a common area again, the orangish one, and then the terrace that opens to the common area. So as you can see, all of these 3 schools, they have a terrace as an outdoor space. We have common areas, especially in the school 3 and school 1. Actually, the common area in school 2 worked as an indoor terrace. And then we have the differences in terms of the location of the atrium and the stairways. And then in terms of their neighborhood, you can see from the side maps that we have school one with the school ground and then access to a public park just across a very not busy street. It's very quiet street. And then school two, we have 3 blocks actually. I chose the main block because the classrooms are located here, and then a kind of a big lawn. There wasn't any public space or open space around here, and then we have school 3 here, which doesn't have any school ground, and it's just opposite a very big public park. So what students like in these schools and they didn't like in schools. So they really like these covered terraces because it protected them from inclement weather. From the school rules, when we know that if the school is rainy, if it's a rainy day, they are not allowed out. And we had like the last 3 years, they were really rainy, and I looked it up, and about 1/3 of the year we had rain, so they were not allowed out on those days. But when they had covered terraces, they could use this, if it's too sunny or if it was raining. So they really appreciated that they could still have access to outdoors. It was really good that they had kind of like design terraces or play opportunities for students. But for example, in this one on the right hand side, they said yes, they appreciated the play equipment, but they found it too much. The design tried too much because of the flower boxes, and they found it really cluttered. A lot of obstacles, as they said. But if they were given the choice to choose the terraces or school grounds or neighborhood park, they still chose school ground or neighborhood park, not the terraces, because of a change of scenery and to be somewhere different. They said it just feels better to be outside rather than sitting inside of the building, because we spent a lot of hours in already during class. The other characteristic that we have in vertical schools, and we don't really get them in horizontal schools, is this kind of connection between different learning environments. So we have this, for example, hello upstairs here, which connects floors quite openly, and then we have these common areas between classrooms that students, could still join their friends from the other class and do some activities together. And because of the atrium, the students could, just connect with other students visually, as this one actually, this a 9-year-old student in school one described. Kids can see what's going on down there, and if they see someone, they can knock on the glass and wave. And sometimes kids can watch their friends go to choir or on those steps down there, and they wave to them. So they really like the idea of just being aware of what's going on around them. But the problem with this was that because, for example, in the case of school one, the helium stairs were connected to the common areas, and then the classrooms, the noise could travel actually across the levels. As the students said, the stomping on the stairs could be really loud. If someone drops something on level 1, you can hear it from level 4. And it could happen during the class time, actually. So what they did in this one, school 2, they located the stairs in the corner of the building and separated them from the atrium to minimize noise. So this is in contrast to the other one that's actually the stairs is connected all the other from level, actually ground level until level 5, and it's connected to the learning areas. The other thing that this school did, school 2, was the provision of breakout rooms. So they were rooms with soundproof walls. Students could choose to go there. They actually saw it as a privilege to go there to do some activities in quiet. And it was really good to, for in terms of inclusiveness actually in the school, because in the previous one, school one, some students that couldn't actually cope with the level of noise, and they were neurodiverse, they had to go somewhere else. They had to pull out from the classroom and just they created a separate actually space on one of those levels to cater for these students when there is a problem. And when I didn't talk to any of those students. When I talked to other students, they talking about those, they actually labeled them as those with disability. But in this one, anybody could go to these spaces without being labeled, and it was quite inclusive. And the other good thing about this school, so on the right-hand side, the classrooms with breakout rooms are those that are general classrooms. On the left-hand side, we have a specialist. This is a high school. And the general classrooms, they had dividers between them that they could go out. They could get them out, and then they can have all these three classrooms connected to create a larger cluster of students. It can be divided into three separate classrooms, the same size. They got barriers that go between them. If we have three groups, we can split them off, and especially if they are friends, we can put them in different groups so that they can communicate. So still areas to connect classrooms together, but they can be separated. So it's quite flexible in this school. The other problem with these schools were vertical movement. For primary schools, they saw it as, it was really tiring for them just going upstairs and downstairs like at least 4 times a day. And yeah, and they didn't like it. It was too much effort for them. But for secondary school students, they didn't really like to spend time going up. Didn't really mind going up because they believed that it made them fit, but they didn't want to waste their time, their recess time going up the stairs. We have only 30-minute breaks, which isn't that long. If you have a class on level 6, you may walk down, which take 5 minutes, then you get at the bottom, you eat for 10 minutes, and sometimes teachers turn up early and get mad at you for being late. So it's just because it took the recess time from them that they didn't really want to spend on that. But to minimize that time being spent on going up and down, it's good to put the common facilities on intervening floors. So, for example, in school 1, the whole school vertically was divided into 3 main sections, and then the middle section had all the specialists. So based on this student said, you just need to walk up 1 or 2 levels and you're at where you want to be. So it's really important to where you put actually the common facilities. And sometimes they had these large areas between classrooms with, even some indoor activities. They played handball here, or they had the library. So they could still spend the time on their own level where their classrooms were. But on the other hand, we had these corridors, in the same school, long corridors or narrow hallways that they felt very skinny and cramped. And this caused the issue of overcrowding because it's just a number of students that using these, traveling from one level to another, or from one classroom to another. So this is not kind of like a school ground that they're still lining up, but they find it quite cramped, especially if there is a kind of locker on the same corridor. And the other source of overcrowding was the stairs. So there is a lot of students going up and down the stairs during recess time or when the bell rings, actually. So she says, I know many that have fallen on the stairs, especially when there is a lot of people walking up and down the stairs. It gets quite hard to not sleep. You get shoved around a little, and it's really hard if you're going down. So to mitigate the impact of that, this school, actually the student was from the same school, but they were using the main staircase. And the other students, they tried to avoid the use of this staircase and using the fire escape staircases on the other side of the building. Usually we don't use those steps unless we're going down because they're really packed with people. So we use either the fire escapes there or these ones here, just depending on which side our classrooms are. So it's really important where you put the fire escapes around the building. The other opportunity for students to avoid overcrowded space was the use of public space around the school. So this school was developed, when this school was developed, actually the park was still there, but they developed the park to be suitable for students' use. And everybody actually, and they negotiated the use with the council, and they opened the park to students. So it's a very quiet street, and students had the choice of using either the school ground or the park on the other side of the street. And the way that the school managed the use of the outdoor area was quite clever because everybody who wanted to play soccer, they were just allowed here. Everybody else could just play here because actually soccer ball is just very intrusive and they found it really distracting. So they were allowed to play running games or any other types like handball here in school ground and just only soccer on the public space. And the student found this very effective. So this is an 8-year-old student commented on that. The other open space is on the park. If you want to play soccer, that's where you usually go. People play tag and run around in the school ground mainly. They could get hit by soccer balls if soccer was played on the school ground. Okay, so in the interior parts, vertical schools could get could feel crowded because of the openness of it, in terms of how space being open and united. But sometimes there are some nooks and crannies around the school, inside the school that was really helpful because the students could just join their friends, and they created actually smaller groups to enjoy those areas in a more homogeneous activities. And small enclosures in the corners were the most common indoor subspaces where they could find less people. Also, because of breaking down the outdoor space into multiple terraces, it really worked out for different types of activities, making sure that they are homogeneous and they don't conflict with each. They don't come in conflict with each other. Something that really happens in horizontal schools with larger school grounds. So we know that they have larger space outside school or just at school, but the problem is that everything happens in one single space and they are not separated efficiently. But because there were multiple terraces in the school, they could choose where to go based on the type of activities going around. So with these students said more of their friend groups are smaller groups. So you sit together on the terrace with your friend groups, just trying to talk, not getting attacked by some people playing football or basketball, falling in your head. You want to avoid football people just running and tackling each other. But the problem was that even we had multiple terraces, in these schools, they couldn't use actually all these terraces because of the issue with supervision. So schools that they didn't have sufficient staff to supervise the students, they limited the use of students to only 1 or 2 terraces. I wish we could sit on the terraces of all the levels. You're not allowed to go past level 1 in your lunch breaks because there is no supervision up here. So even if it was planned this way so students would be able to use terraces and the population could be divided, and it works well if it could be, but it's not the way that it's managed by schools. And the other problem was with how students actually how students' movement was programmed in vertical schools, especially primary school students, because they were actually following teachers. So this is the recess time when the bell rang and they wanted to go to the school ground, and it's quite they couldn't actually pause and stop and interact with each other. So as they said, okay, not quite here, but I actually asked them to just comment on this area with the couch and chairs and some artwork, which has actually a good view to the basketball court downstairs. And asked them if they would like to use this space, and they said, okay, we don't have any time to use this space. We just need to follow the teachers, but if we had, yes, why not? So although architects create these spaces for the students to actually enjoy, it's not necessarily there for them to use because of how their movement and activity has been programmed by the school. The use of large windows and elevated windows is quite common in vertical schools, and the students really like them because of the view to the outside. Without them, they said that they feel cramped, but they may cause glare, and especially that's problematic when they have these large windows open to classroom environments, and this is a problem for especially neurodiverse students because they're quite sensitive to that. Scientific design. So from the literature, we know that offering natural settings or incorporating natural settings into the design of vertical schools is not that easy. This is a garden actually that's been created in one of those schools, and the students love that. It was really small. It was used for gardening activities, for actually classroom activities, but it was still there, and they found it really relaxing. This was one of the favorite places that they wanted to spend time, even if it wasn't class time for that specific subject. But biophilic design is not just limited to the provision of natural settings. It's also about the creating the experience that you can find in nature. Like prospect and refuge and risk and peril. So those elevated terraces can offer views to the surrounding environment. They found it calming and relaxing, and those rooftop gardens, they created this kind of risk and peril experience. I love the view from level 6. I can see everything from here, and it's still safe. It's scary. And then I asked them, oh, okay, didn't you like it? And so she said, yeah, I like it. So they like it, how scary it is when they just, stand up and see everything around. So to conclude, we know that vertical schools have some obstacles to be child friendly, but they can still be child friendly. So we can provide expansive green terraces, and we need to design them to respond to children's developmental needs, not the way that we just enjoy terraces, making sure that they have play opportunities and not too much cluttered with like flower boxes and anything. And then make sure that we have open hallways and not narrow corridors, because this way we just waste the space on something that is just useful in traveling around. But with open hallways, we can offer opportunities for play for students to stay on their own learning environment zone. And then connectivity between levels actually is valued as long as incompatible activities are separated acoustically. So the issue of noise is quite significant in these schools. Actually, one of these schools that had the problem of noise, they asked for some changes to be made on the school to overcome that issue, and the department is actually spending 500,000 more on that school to overcome this issue of noise. So we need to make sure that compatible activities are connected, but incompatible activities are acoustically separated. And then subspaces are necessary to provide refuge when students need to retreat, recharge, and relax. And terraces can work very well as subspaces as long as they are allowed to spend time there. The overall layout needs to minimize the use of stairs, especially for younger students. They found it really hard traveling up and down, and it's really good to put the common spaces just on the intervening floors. School master planning should consider the possibility of access to neighborhood amenities, particularly parks and green spaces. This is actually the focus of my other study, and the opportunities and the challenges it comes with. But it means that we need to collaborate with not just the students, educators, but also with the councils to make sure that not just schools have access to nearby public spaces, but also residents around the school can use spaces inside schools, like sports courts, because it's very likely that these vertical schools have some covered sports courts that can be used by the community. That's it. Yes.
Just on that last point about access to neighbourhood public facilities, what sort of arrangements do they have to have with local government? Because there's all kinds of occupational health and safety issues.
Yeah.
If they don't have enough supervision for all the outdoor spaces in the building, the terraces, are they obliged to have it for the public spaces where there could be non-school people also using it?
Yes.
And do they have to pay for it? For that access?
It's really interesting. Actually, for it depends on the state. Apparently, for example, in Victoria, they didn't pay the council for the time that the students use actually outdoor space, but it also depends on the facility that they use. If it's like a tennis court or kind of a sports court, yes, they need to pay the council. But if it's just like the open public park, they didn't pay for it. But it was controversial, not just because of supervision, but also because of the amount of maintenance that council needed to carry. Because the students could, take their food there, just eat there, and just left their rubbish there. And yes, the supervision was not easy. For one of the schools that they gave the students actually access to the public space as well as school ground. They found it challenging because of the number of staff on duty, but it doesn't usually happen this way. So, for example, for the other school, they only had this space outside, so in the public space. So everybody actually moved there with staff on duty. And then when I asked about supervision, they actually limited the students' use to a specific part of the park that could be supervised. And yes, other people can also use the space at the same time. You know, people with dogs can come, you know, and students, children want to pet the dog, they are not allowed. So yeah, all these sorts of things can happen. But overall, they still, you know, love going out, and just going out of school was really interesting and just exciting for the students during the school time with their friends.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Fatemeh. It's really interesting work. I'm just interested, there's so much deliberate intended design in these spaces. So this is for that, this is for that. And I'd just like to hear ways that students were using space that were surprising to the people that designed them, if there were particular examples that came out of the walking tours you did.
Yeah, actually, you know, the whole intention of this study was first to understand the characteristics of these spaces that are found by students. Because vertical schools have, you know, a lot of nooks and crannies, I just wanted to know if they are being used by students and if they are valued by students. But then I found out that students' movement and use of the vertical school is so much programmed, like the way that it's designed, that students that even didn't recognize those, they couldn't actually go there. It's really kind of opposite to the way that they use school ground, as I said, in between spaces, or those that are not designed leftover spaces. They are leftover spaces in schools, but because of the way that the school day is being operated, they didn't have the opportunity to use them. And sometimes just talk about it. Okay, how about this space? And then, oh, okay, yes, we could use that. And I would love to use that, but I can't really use. I didn't use that because there is no time to just pause and just use that space. Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was very, very informative. And I was very glad that you mentioned about neurodiverse students, which I can imagine it's a more challenging environment. So I noticed in one of the photos, the carpets, they were purple. And I was thinking, society's changed. People have to be prepared for a different sort of life now as working on the farm in the past. But this is a very different sort of life, vertical schools. And also people are living in apartments, vertical homes. So I was wondering if there was any way that you could see whether it had a bigger impact on students who both lived in an apartment and went to school in a vertical school, or whether there was any sort of way of looking at, for example, when students go to the school counsellor or the outcomes of their grades, was there any way of seeing whether it was having any long-term impact? Or would that be, you know, whether it was beneficial or detrimental, particularly for the younger children in this sort of non-traditional school environment?
Okay, so what's the question? Sorry.
So the question was there a way of finding out whether there's a long-term impact on the students in that school, in that different environment?
Yes.
And or how could that be done maybe? How could you find out, was it actually good or bad for the children, the outcome of being in a vertical school?
Actually, I didn't talk to any neurodiversity student, or I didn't talk to the school staff about these students. My only finding from the suitability of these schools for these students were from those other students that just talk about neurodiversity students and how schools being used by those. But our knowledge of inclusivity for this population in school environments is very limited. So we don't really know how they interact with the built environment. We know that, yes, from educational side of it, we know how educators actually try to accommodate space or just alter their schedule to make sure that they actually that they can accommodate, they can cater for these students. But in terms of the physical environments that can facilitate their use, our knowledge is very limited. We just know that the access to outdoor environment is really good for these types of students, because, for example, students for autism, with autism on autism spectrum disorder, if they get into the opposition kind of sort of behavior, it's very difficult for us to keep them with the other group, and it's really good to just keep the students in the same space and take all the other students from the space, not the students that is in opposition, and it means that we need kind of subspace or access to outdoor space very kind of directly to make sure that we can still go on with everyday classroom activities without just pausing and making sure, because it can take time for these students to just get back to their class activities. So in these schools, going back to this school, it's really important that we don't get really noisy environments, and we have those subspaces that's been designed, and also terrace is really helpful because in horizontal schools we probably have only one single outdoor space, a school ground, but in vertical school we have multiple terraces, and the whole group or the whole class can be moved to the terrace, still going and doing some outdoor learning activities. So it really depends how we design the schools and how we manage the outdoor-indoor connection.
Is somebody from online?
Yeah, is there anybody online who has a question as well?
Okay. Yeah. So this might be slightly outside the study per se, but I just want to know your opinion of it. So often public schools, like not talking about public schools, are not just teaching spaces. So they also form a part of a public space of the community. At least like in India, it's usually, and in the UK, it's usually election duty happens there. Public meetings happen there for smaller towns. So what would you think as the vertical schools have done to accommodate those, or like should be doing? It's like what would be the vertical school equivalent of continuous?
Because they are indoor space mostly, they can accommodate indoor sporting activities. If they have kind of bigger hall designed for sports, and because building these kinds of having this infrastructure in school is quite expensive. Sometimes they negotiate with the council, so the council actually pays for some parts of the school, the construction of the school, and they have rights to use those spaces outside of school hours or during weekends or when the school is closed. So and also school grounds, if they get to have a school ground, they can be designed in a flexible way, so they can have like community market or something inside school. But from the study of these cases or other cases, it's mainly the school hall that is being used by the community. Yes.
A question. You may have touched upon this in your presentation and I missed it, but I'm going to ask anyway. In these cases, were these like public schools or were they private schools?
Two of them were public. I had one public, I have one K to 6 public, one 7 to 12 public, and one K to 12 private.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ones. I guess then my question is about like size of classrooms and like fitting growing child populations. Yeah. How do vertical schools cater differently to that as opposed to horizontal schools?
Yes. So the private one actually had really smaller classroom sizes. And the private school that I looked at, it used to be an office building. It was renovated to be private school. But the other ones, so actually the private school, they only get 1 class per grade. The other ones, they had like 3 at least, from what I remember. So yeah, the ideal extendability, yes, it could be really difficult for these schools unless they just, build another block
Yeah, sure.
next to that.
Yeah.
So actually, the schools that I looked at, because they were built very recently, I mean the last 5 days, they were not up to their capacity even. They catered for example, the high school catered for years 7 and 8, and the majority of the school was still empty, and they had this problem with overcrowded stairs with more than half of the school still empty. So yeah.
So I guess was my follow-up question to that is like access. In terms of perhaps people with mobility or children with mobility issues, I'm assuming there were elevators at some point.
So none of the students, actually, none of those school students were allowed to use elevator, even those that the one with 10 stories, unless senior students were on the top floors, and they only used the stairs when they came to, just arrived schools. Other ones, they had to use stairs unless they had a kind of, disability. Yeah. But yes, that's still that's still an issue,
Yeah.
it happens.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like little kindergarten kids with their tiny legs versus the stairs.
Yeah, they actually changed the levels to cater kindergarten students on the top floor. It was quite the same. So for the public primary school that I looked at, they were catering kindergarten students on level 6, and they did that because they had a rooftop garden. They didn't have to come down to the school ground during the recess time, and they were not really actually allowed in their neighborhood park, so they could use their space upstairs.
Are there any questions from online? I can't see anything from the chat, I'm sure. I do have another question, I'm so sorry. How, because you said in some instances children would go to like outside the school grounds to use outdoor playing areas. In terms of like supervision, what were the kind of supervision provisions that were happening out there? I imagine if you had a few students, it would be a little bit harder to supervise, or do they have like really strict boundaries?
In the use of public space?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So from what I remember, they had 3 staff on duty, and the students, this is something that the student actually said. You can go out there and nobody really recognized that. Just an 8-year student said that. They knew that, but they didn't do that. But they were really concentrating on playing soccer and everything. They didn't want to leave, but they didn't really necessarily like public people using the space at the same time. So it could come there was some conflicts probably at some points, and if there was a playground equipment actually specifically in the site, they just wanted to play in the playground just by themselves, because there were a lot of the students already from the school, and if there were some public people using the playground, so there was some issues around that. But in terms of supervision, I think they had enough staff members, but the problem was to make sure that the school had enough staff members to go with the students. But when they went, actually, there was enough to supervise the students. And they didn't actually go with the whole school. They staggered. So sometimes it was just year 3 group, sometimes year 4 group. So it was only 1, 2, or 3 classrooms going out there. It wasn't the whole.
Right. Okay. So it was rotated. Thank you.
Did you get any?
So for example, in school two that they had like multiple levels, they sometimes they went on the top floor to just play freely and do whatever they want. But yeah, they actually told me, I didn't see them because I was just interviewing other students in other levels. But they love the idea of just using spaces that are really quiet, nobody's there. Yeah, nothing necessarily bad was happening, but they just wanted to, just be naughty and do something that is not necessarily allowed to children. Yeah.
Climbing on the rooftop.
Do they use the rooftop for sporting activities? Like I know St Andrew's School, for example, in Sydney has tennis courts and things up there. Is that a general thing with these as well? They use the roof space?
St Andrews actually has, yes, and it's covered with nets,
Yeah.
making sure that the balls are not flying around. The other one, the rooftop garden wasn't used for sports activities.
But they did have a garden there, do they? Do they have a garden there?
Yes, they actually use the public space out there. But there was a sports court actually that was for council use usually, but students sometimes use that, and it was surrounded by nets.
Mhm.
Yeah. So yeah, there are some terraces that have been used for sports activities.
Okay, so any more questions? No, my mind. Okay, well, thank you, Fatemeh. Oh, wait, I take it back. There's a hand raised from Jennifer. Jennifer, if you'd like to unmute.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm from the city of Bellevue in Washington State, so it's a bit late here. I apologize. I had some difficulty with Teams. I missed the part about how you incorporate the need for spaces for children who are neurodiverse into a vertical school.
Okay, so it's a challenge, and we think that it's the best way to make sure it's inclusive. It's not necessarily something that we create for this population, because they might be labeled by other students because of the use of that specific spaces if you just design something for them. So we need to make sure that in each of those learning spaces we have some subspaces provided for them, or provided for not just neurodiverse students, because other students also love those quiet areas, with less sensory activities going on around. So it's good to make sure we have some spaces, and also access to outdoor environments. So they want to break away if they just couldn't cope with the level of noise, for example, or the lighting, or the color of something that's happening around. So it's good to offer alternative opportunities for them to use space. Did I answer your question?
It did. I'm sorry. So I think, I guess what I'm thinking is of students who are primary school, and are either not diagnose, I mean, diagnose, it doesn't matter to diagnose or not, but they need a one-on-one assistance. And having children myself, it's very difficult for me to imagine a way that you could eliminate distractions, if that makes sense. I mean, it's a difficult task even in a normal, quote, normally laid out school. So in the already built vertical schools, are you seeing any problem?
Yes, if it's an entirely indoor environment, that's with all spaces connected to each other and to the movement areas, where there is no separation of activities that are not necessarily compatible with each other, that could be really problematic. But I understand your point that it's quite difficult even providing these spaces in horizontal schools. Because we don't necessarily think about those. But the thing is that we don't. I actually I don't have a background in education, but I work with a colleague whose background is in education, and she believes, from her research on this area, she believes that it's good to have these kids with other students in the same space, because we need to raise the bar for them, because they need to learn how to cope with that eventually. So this kind of transmission doesn't happen if we just offer separated spaces for them, where they just feel really comfortable always, all the time. So we just need to make sure we have areas that if they being triggered by some where the environment, they can still have some relaxing areas to just retreat from the main space that caused that problem, to get back to the to the activity. So actually, the provision of subspaces is not difficult in vertical schools, considering the terraces available, if it is on HV level, and subspaces that or breakout rooms if they've been designed or incorporated into the design of classrooms.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. A fast follow-up question to that then. And again, I'm Canadian and I'm here in the stateside, so I'm not sure how this is addressed in Australia. When you have children in school, which here it's required, no matter how profound their disability, is that a thing in Australia? And I guess two, would a child with a profound physical and developmental or psychosocial disability have the ability to attend a vertical school?
So because actually the ability to attend this vertical, sometimes they don't really have any other choices because the school is in their catchment area in Australia. And I was observing actually when parents came to school and talking to the teachers or the school principal, that they said, yes, we accommodate needs for this population if your students are neurodiverse. But yes, we Australian schools, they have actually they students, neurodiverse students, 70% of them actually in Australia attend public schools, not those special schools. So yes, they have a kind of obligation, these public schools, to to enroll with the students if they want to.
I might also add, because I had a bit of experience both with the Californian system and also with the New South Wales education system. In both situations, they often also have specialist schools for the advanced cases of neurodiversity. And so in both cases, they may have either a special classroom that's set aside just for neurodiverse people, or even a whole mini school, should we call it, that's set aside for people of a similar sort of category, particularly on the autism spectrum or something like that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know. So I was just going to say that might sort of alleviate the extreme situation where the student might not be so suitable for the vertical school environment.
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely not in California. Again, I'm from Vancouver and happen to be right now in Seattle. Yeah, here we I'm sidetracking this whole thing. So very fast, I was thinking of my friend who is a special education teacher, and she works with children who are profoundly physically disabled and developmentally disabled. She has a class of maybe 8 students. She has students who are 12, 14, 16, and their greatest ability is to be able to operate a can crusher, like a aluminum soda can, because that's what they can do. So those are the kind of students I was thinking of, and this isn't the place to address it. I'll go ahead and drop my LinkedIn into the chat, and if you feel like reaching out, that'd be lovely.
Thanks for that,
Thank you.
Jennifer. I'm just conscious of time as well, as it is after 5 on a Friday for us and probably very early in Vancouver. So we might wrap up there. So thank you so much, Fatemeh. And for those of you online and in the room, our next seminar is on the 6th of October, and it will be from Professor Hazel Easthope. So keep an eye out in your inboxes for that one. Otherwise, thank you. Have a great weekend.